On this episode of Mothman in the Bible Belt, former Hollywood gaffer Kyle Warmack dishes on his past career lighting movie and television show sets, landing an acting gig in a campy Damian Chapa movie, and working a dolly on the set of a Randy Travis music video. Warmack talks about being in awe of Sally Field on the set of Hello, My Name is Doris, and he chimes in on Elizabeth Banks' directorial success with Cocaine Bear after lighting her in the West Virginia shot movie Little Accidents. Coming up next.
Welcome to the Mothman in the Bible Belt podcast with your host, Buck Fantastic.
Girl Scout cookies.
Kyle Warmack hails from the San Francisco Bay Area, a 2007 graduate of the UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television. Warmack has 75 gaffing and cinematographer credits to his name on the Internet Movie Database. After 2 West Virginia movie shoots, and a AmeriCorps position at the Clio Foundation lured Warmack back to the Mountain State. In 2021, Warmack obtained his Master of Arts degree in Humanities from Marshall University. He currently works at a popular West Virginia arts and humanities organization where he occasionally puts his expertise with lighting and cinematography to use. Join me, your host, Buck Fantastic, for another exciting episode of Mothman of the Bible Belt. It's eclectic chit-chat of otherworldly origins. Welcome to the Mothman of the Bible Belt, Kyle. What's up?
How's it going?
It's going well. You're from the San Francisco area.
Mm-hmm.
You were brought here first to the wonderful state of West Virginia for a little indie flick called Little Accidents.
Mm-hmm.
You did lighting.
Mm-hmm.
Did you immediately fall in love with the state, or like what drew you back?
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to clarify. I actually showed up a year or two earlier than that for an even smaller indie film called Druid Peak. I don't honestly know if that's on my IMDb. So Little Accidents was the second time I'd been to West Virginia, but I was in the same area for both of them. For Druid Peak, we shot in Mount Hope for about 2 weeks. And then for Little Accidents, we ended up in Beckley for about 5 weeks, 5-6 weeks or so. So Druid Peak was a really interesting experience. I mean, you know, if you've never been to West Virginia, Mount Hope is a really interesting place to land in. And I went directly there. I didn't get to see much of the state showing up. I arrived at Charleston's airport, which is probably at the time was the smallest airport I'd been to. And I'm immediately picked up and driven on the turnpike to Mount Hope. So I didn't get to see any of Charleston. I didn't get to see anything along the way. It was raining, kind of a late summer day, late in the day. So the light is fading as I'm trekking down rainy turnpike. Get to Mount Hope. I've got no idea where I am. I pull up, basically like throw my stuff inside the building, and the director of photography who I was meeting, I think for the first time, I think this was my first introduction to Rachel Morrison, who is a really big name DP now, but she, I think she and I kind of shook hands for the first time there. And she said, "Hey, we're about to head out on a scout. Do you want to go?" So I don't even think I walked in the building before I jumped in another car and went on the scout.
Did you have any preconceived notions about what West Virginians were before you came here?
Not really, which I find is somewhat rare now. I came here, I didn't know anything about the state. I knew it was a state, which is nice. You know, having lived here for 7 or 8 years now, it's pretty annoying that people don't know that we're a state. So I did know that much, but I didn't have much background for it. And as a result, I also didn't walk in thinking anything in particular about folks here. You know, I think I'd like to think the best of folks wherever I go, and so I just kind of walk in and see what's there.
What'd you think about Little Accidents, the movie?
The film itself, like
Yeah.
how it turned out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really proud of Little Accidents. For your audience, Little Accidents is it was filmed entirely in West Virginia, but it doesn't actually state its the location within the film. So it's kind of a sort of a somewhere in Appalachia story, but it revolves around several characters who are affected by a mining accident in which a number of men are killed. There's only one survivor from a mine explosion. The men who were in there were trapped for hours together before the one remaining guy was rescued, and that survivor's played by Boyd Holbrook, who's gone on to do some amazing things. He was in Netflix's Narcos series. He was the bad guy in Logan, the Wolverine movie Logan, with Hugh Jackman and such. So he's done some awesome stuff, and he was awesome in Little Accidents. It was great to watch him work. So it's a small town story. We filmed for about 5 weeks in Beckley, a couple of days at a coal mine outside of Charleston as well. I have yet to actually kind of to go back through my records and figure out which coal mine we were at the time. But I do have my old call sheets and such, and I can dig that up.
Was that based on Sago?
I think so. I believe so. That was much fresher in everybody's minds at the time. I want to say this is 2014 or 2015, but don't quote me on it. That's something I'm going to be very fuzzy on throughout as we talk.
There was only one survivor.
Yeah. And I think that's where it came from. Again, it never references its sort of inspirations there. I believe that the writer-director had written it and was kind of part of this prestigious sort of film workshop, had written it originally as a short, and then through the workshop made the connections to turn it into a feature. So it had Boyd Holbrook, Josh Lucas, Elizabeth Banks, Chloe Sevigny were kind of the bigger names in it, the adult leads, and there were a couple of kid leads as well. And so it's really about this small town that has differing experiences with, and of course, people have differing levels of knowledge of what went down. So I don't want to give any spoilers, but there's hints that throughout that maybe the executives at the mine knew more about what was going on safety wise than the miners were informed of. And Boyd's character is going through so much trauma from being the only, so much survivor's guilt that he doesn't want to testify. And it's not because he doesn't, it's not necessarily because he doesn't want to get anybody in trouble. He just doesn't want to talk about it, and him dealing with that trauma and other people dealing with trauma. The performances are all fantastic. It was fun to work on. It was satisfying to work on. Not every film, even good films that you work on aren't always satisfying, but I really enjoyed a lot of what we got to do with Little Accidents. It was challenging because it was very small budget, but it was a great experience.
Could you have ever imagined that Elizabeth Banks would go on to direct Cocaine Bear?
Well, she did at least one of the Pitch Perfect sequels. So I wasn't that surprised. I think that she's kind of shown comedy chops as a director. So moving to Cocaine Bear, I don't know. It's it's a wild and woolly business. It's hard.
I love that movie. When you moved from California to West Virginia, was it a huge culture shock for you?
Not for me. And people have asked me that. That was the number one question I got when I first moved out here. The first question was why. The second question was, are you feeling culture shock, or did you feel culture shock? And it's honestly, there's more culture shock going back the other way to visit back in California, because it is so much more densely populated. To come out here, there's less traffic, fewer people, but all the same stuff is here. You got a lot of the same chains. Of course, they don't have Tudors or Genos out there. But my family is from originally from Northern California, a much more rural area in the Central Valley. And it's got it's a town of 12,000 people. It's not that big. While 12,000 is nothing to scoff at here in West Virginia, there's still a sense of continuity. And I think there is a continuity in rural culture to an extent within the United States, not universal. I don't mean to claim that all of these places are the same, because there's like tons of agriculture. So it's all orchards and rice fields and such where my family's from. But in terms of population density and the kinds of things that people value and the kinds of things that people talk about, and the ways in which they're affected by things like poverty and the opioid epidemic, and so forth, it's variations on a theme in certain ways. So I didn't feel it that difficult to, what was the toughest thing to adapt to in West Virginia? Probably had less to do with California culture than it was sort of film industry culture, is that when I would do, like, try to go meet folks and do something, I always had this sort of like, all right, here, in and out, like, let's get in here, let's talk, let's figure out what everybody wants, 15 minutes, half an hour tops. And every time I walked into a place in West Virginia, they'd want me to sit down and they'd want to chat, they'd talk about, where I was from and so forth. So I learned within that first year that if I was going to go around and talk to folks and get to know people, and work in humanities and history out here, then I had to be prepared to sit down for an hour. So I started budgeting in like an hour for every meeting, just to sort of be able to sit down and get to know folks. And now it's much more second nature. I do that automatically, but that took a little while to get used to.
So is rice-a-roni really San Francisco's favorite treat?
Oh, Lord. I couldn't tell you what it is, but it's probably not rice-a-roni. Maybe I'm the wrong person to ask. My mom will tell you straight up she doesn't like to cook dinner, so maybe we didn't get the rice-a-roni that everybody else was getting. But nah, I don't. I've never known it to be particularly prevalent in the Bay Area. Bay Area's got a really, really diverse culinary culture, so I don't know. We've got a one thing.
When you came back to West Virginia, you were an AmeriCorps.
Yeah.
Did you think about getting into TV, movie work here locally in West Virginia, or was that part of the plan? Or
not part of the plan. I didn't come out here to keep doing what I was doing, or if I wanted to keep doing what I was doing, I would have stayed where I was. My goal was to, in transitioning careers, was to start having more of an impact. There's a lot to love about the film industry. It is full of talented, creative, amazing people, not enough of whom get acknowledged for the work that they do. The electricians, the set lighting technicians, the gaffers, the best boys, the key grips, the makeup artists, all of them, there's not enough recognition for that work. And that's amazing to participate in. And there's definitely still things that I miss about it and think about. But the film industry, when you're doing on location work, especially, you got a tendency to go out there, film in a place, and leave and never come back. And it is extractive in a sense, not nearly to the same degree that say the oil and gas industry or coal or whatever are extractive, but there's still a sense of coming to mine a place for its beauty or its texture, for example, and then you depart and you don't bring any of that back unless, in some cases industries have taken root in places like Georgia has really grown up their industry through sustained effort. But when there'll always be this sort of like pop out to a place and shoot somewhere. You'll never have all the locations you need right there within a day's commute. And when you show up to a place and you shoot for a while, when you work in a place for several weeks and you get to know folks, and you can't do it. No film crew operates completely alone. You need local talent. You need local people who can tell you where to go and who can cater and so on and so forth. That's assuming you're not also hiring local technical expertise. In West Virginia, there wasn't a lot to draw on there. We really had to bring in most of the crew at the time. But I didn't want that feeling. When I came back to West Virginia, and Little Accidents, I feel, should be a film that is known more about here Not because, oh, you should know about this film because it's great, but because there should have been more of an effort, I think, on the part of the producers or whoever it is that really kind of has a say in this to get the film out here in West Virginia and show West Virginians what their state looks like on film. And because not a lot gets shot here. So it's a special thing. People are interested. People are honored. People are excited. And so then when you don't show back up and really kind of give them a chance to enjoy what they participated in, it's a bummer, I think. And so I didn't want to participate as much in that. I wanted to take the lifelong passion that I've had for history and turn it into something that was contributing back to society in some way. And I was also, I think it's worth saying, like, I graduated from UCLA in 2007. And I'd been working on short films within UCLA, and then got out there and immediately kind of started working in the industry that summer. I worked on my first feature film, absolutely no budget thing, that first summer. At the time, streaming was not a thing. Those first few years, right when I got out, the writer's strike was going on, and then of course the recession hit. All of those things affected how the industry worked. And in those first few years, also, the internet was becoming more and more of a platform for where things could get released. So there were all these weird experiments with, like, putting up free web series on YouTube and whatnot, and nobody had figured it out. And studio level streaming was not a thing. Cut to a decade later, and it was becoming everything. And now it is even more so. And we've noticed some of these transitions, and I think in other ways they've just crept up on us. But the big thing is that for me was I was just watching, when I had gone into all of this, I really wanted to, it was for the love of film, for the love of the art form itself. And a lot of amazing things are still getting made, yes. But there is so much getting made on every level. I mean, we're just living in this sort of deluge of content all the time. And the more I worked on stuff, the less it felt like it really meant anything or like it moved the needle at all, because it felt like we had massively ramped up the amount of stuff we were making, but that the value that was being put into it was shrinking on a per project basis. And so, from a moral perspective, was one of the reasons why I wanted to see if there was a place where I could make, and I don't mean like a worldwide impact. I just mean I wanted to go somewhere and feel the difference that I was making. That's all.
I just want to point out to listeners that if you live in Kanawha County, the Kanawha County Public Library has 3 copies of Little Accidents.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Thank you for looking that up. I didn't know that. Somebody was asking me about it just the other day. They were like, I want to show that. Professor was asking to show it to their class. And I was like, well, if you can't find it, you can borrow my copy. But now I know.
So you got your undergrad in film and television. When you graduated, was it really competitive to get a job that was technical behind the scenes in movies in California or on television sets?
Yes and no. There are always more sets that need you. You'll never not have. The question is whether you can make a living bouncing around to those various sets. So the stuff I was doing at first was so ludicrously low budget. Like I wasn't making a living wage doing that stuff. But there were historical reasons why that was happening. I don't know how different it would have been, because I came out into the industry in the midst of the writer's strike, and for those of anybody who wasn't paying attention at the time, there have been more recent writer's strikes, and a similar kind of deal, only this one went on a lot longer. This was, like, I think the longest one we've had in the last couple of decades. And as a result, original stuff wasn't getting written. They were basically doing, like, the studios could do, to a certain extent, reality shows, and they could finish out their backlog, but a ton of new stuff was just shut down. And there was a trickle-down effect from that, in that non-union stuff could still shoot, because the studio stuff, the big stuff, it's all unionized. but the smaller stuff is not. So that stuff could still proceed. You could get non Writers Guild writers doing stuff, and the rest of us could all work on that. But because it's the only game in town, it was really tough. Even union guys were taking those gigs because they're trying to put food on the table. So there was a very specific set of circumstances in effect where it was tougher for me to find work that could pay the rent, because most of the rent paying work was saturated with guys who ordinarily wouldn't even look at that. These were guys who would have been working on the studio lots day in, day out, but they were looking for anything they could get. And since those film sets could get those guys at rates they would not normally have been able to, they wouldn't have been able to go that low before. So there's this trickle down effect of guys like me who were just starting out, just like having to take the crumbs. So that was a really tough first couple of years, just trying to figure it out. Help from roommates, help from family, it just scraping by. And after that, after the momentum recovered from the writer's strike, it got better. It started getting much better a couple of years later, and then eventually also I got my union days, joined IATSE Local 728, the set lighting union, and things got better from there too. So that's when we started to hit this sort of golden age of streaming in the mid 2010s. So more, tons of work for everybody. So it really does vary depending on what's going on with the industry. I would say there's no universal rule of like, is it tough to get these? If you are good, people always want good people. So if you work hard, you learn fast, and you can, you talk to the right folks, then you'll get work. It's just a question of what kind of work you're getting depending on how things are going. Like right now, I think like COVID, for example, was a thing that heavily impacted the availability of work. That would have been a lousy time to try to get into those jobs.
Were you able to live on your own and pay the bills after the first few years, or was it a constant struggle?
After the first few years, it worked out pretty well. It was never like, it's never rich. I got paid better than I get paid now, but the cost of living was also higher in terms of rent and so forth. So I always had roommates while I was there, a few different sets of roommates. There were two film school friends and I who lived together in Silver Lake afterwards. I did not like the west side of LA. I still don't. So after I got out of UCLA, a trio of us found an apartment in Silver Lake, and I always liked the east side and even farther east than that. So every move that I made was a little bit farther east, and I thought to an even better spot. Silver Lake was okay, still kind of congested. It's really on the edge of LA, and it was known for its hipster scene at the time, which I don't consider myself a hipster. So then later moved to Eagle Rock with a friend of mine who had a house, and he at one point, he had a guy who was renting a room in the house that moved out. Perfect timing for me. Lived there for a few years, and then went a little bit farther east to a little tiny town called Montrose, which is beautiful. Little spot in LA. My favorite place that I lived while I was there. Really kind of a small town mountain vibe. It's up on the edge of the Angeles Crest. And so I could be, on a hiking trail in 10 minutes from my front door. And I didn't find it to be any more difficult of a commute than some of the more congested places I lived closer to downtown and such.
So how long did it take typically for a non-special effects laden lighting setup for a movie?
The answer is going to be all over the place, because special effects, they will certainly affect the amount of time that you need. There's a bajillion other factors that may have nothing to do with special effects. We didn't do an ounce of special effects on Little Accidents, but it's going to vary depending on the complexity of the shot, the complexity of the blocking within the shot, the mood of the scene, the style of the film that you're working on. Like if you're doing something really sort of gritty and that feels real. The priority is not let's make this star look like a star. Like it's supposed to feel very grounded and projects like that, like say Little Accidents, you're not looking to wrap them in gorgeous light for every part of the shot. These people are supposed to look a little bit run down. They're supposed to look like they're going through something, right? And you also don't want it to feel, you don't want a coal miner's house to feel like a sitcom set. So you're not bringing in a ton of heat to light up that space. You're focusing on maybe some shafts of sunlight through the windows. It's also going to depend a lot on environmental factors. Holy cow, in West Virginia, are you fighting the rain a lot? And one of the things that you're trying to do is you're trying to iron out, well, if we started this scene with a sunny look and now 3 hours later we're still in this scene, but the clouds have rolled in, now I might have to take out lights that I wasn't using earlier. So there's definitely no universal answer for that. An insert shot of somebody's hand holding a book takes 3 minutes to light, probably, though any lighting technician can tell you about the time it took 2 hours to shoot a dumb insert like that. And then there's going to be like complicated master shots that you light for hours. You might light the whole dang day. You might have a rigging crew in there to set up for an entire day for a single shot or something like that. So I wish I could get
lighting kits. Do you use for a typical shoot?
You don't. When you were talking about narrative film, we're not really counting in kits. What you're mostly going to measure in is how big your generator is, how big of a truck you've got. So for a small indie film like Little Accidents, we had was called a combo truck, which is where all your grip and lighting, because those are two separate departments. You got your electrical department that is responsible for all the lighting. The grips are responsible for both camera support and lighting support, as well as helping to shape the light with various tools. And on a typical Hollywood set, the grips are going to have their truck and the lighting technicians are going to have their truck. For a small indie feature, a lot of times you're working off of a combo truck. So we had a combo, I want to say 3-ton, maybe 4-ton tops. For people who don't think in terms of the tonnage, that's going to be like a 17 to 20 foot truck, somewhere around there. Think of the bigger enterprise trucks that you've seen on the road, and that'll give you a good guide. So yeah, you're not really, there's going to be the occasional thing that comes in a kit, but most of the time you're kind of working off of, you're building your packages, these sort of bespoke packages for every film, for one thing. If you've gotten lucky and you've gotten to do all your scouts and whatnot, then you have planned that for the locations you have. You might have drop packages that show up for specific locations. You don't do that out in West Virginia. Out in West Virginia, especially for a film like, say, Druid Peak, where I have showed up and I'm getting to scout the day I showed up, and the truck's already on its way down. I've basically built my package through my own experience of working in remote locations and kind of having read the script. And you're also always fighting your budget. There's not a single movie in the world where you're just got all, I mean, I'm sure there are a handful of them, but for most of us, you don't have enough money to do everything and get everything that you want. So you're finding compromises in places where one tool will work for a lot of different things. I'm a little fuzzy on the details for Little Accidents. I'm sticking to that simply because it's the strongest West Virginia example, but I'm pretty sure we didn't have anything bigger than a 4K, which is a 4,000 watt HMI, which is a daylight type lamp. So when you see that sunshine pouring in through the window, sometimes that's natural, rarely in a narrative film, because you're going to be there for hours shooting the same scene and that sunlight's going to move. So you don't want to be beholden to the sunlight. Now, if it's a shorter scene, maybe you can knock it out while the light is favorable. That does happen. But I'd say 8 times out of 10, there's artificial lighting coming in, and a 4K HMI is a daylight type of lamp that does that kind of effect. It's one of the smaller guns that we have, I guess you could say. But I think those were the biggest lamps we had on Little Accidents.
When you're working remotely in the rural areas out in the boonies, do they bring in a porta potty or do you have to bring a shovel?
Most of the time, for most sets, you'll have what's referred to as the honey wagon, which is a rolling set of porta potties, and the size and number of those honey wagons will depend on the size of the set. For something like Little Accidents, I don't think we had a honey wagon most of the set. I think what we did was we had arranged with different locations to use nearby restrooms. Though, now that I think we kind of took it on a location by location basis. We probably had a 2-hole honey wagon if I had to guess, though I don't recall. There were some places where we were just too remote and we would have had to have one. There might have been a handful of locations where we were okay just using location bathrooms that aren't that close to the set. So yeah, there's your answer. The honey wagons are the solution.
I want to go back to Rachel Morrison, the cinematographer.
Yeah.
She shot Black Panther, Little Accidents, Dope, and Cake. How pivotal of a role did she play in your success in the movie and television industry?
Well, I met Rachel Morrison. By the time I met Rachel, I was just doing okay. So like work was steady, things were. But you always appreciate meeting somebody who it just works with, because the gaffer cinematographer relationship it can really help a set run better. And I don't, every gaffer has their style. Every cinematographer has their style. There's cinematographers who are going to tell you exactly where they want every little thing. They're gonna, you know, I wouldn't use so cruel a word as micromanagers, but you know, I mean, they've got that vision in their head. And then there are those who will really kind of stick with a broader creative sense of what they want things to look like, and are more about communicating to the gaffer what that feeling is and letting the gaffer make most of the broad strokes. That was always my working style. Every DP that I worked with, sorry if anybody's new to this, DP, director of photography / cinematographer, those terms are interchangeable. The British say DOP, director of photography, but my style, I think, very much, and Rachel's gelled very well. And there's a handful of cinematographers that I worked with through the years that we just, you know, we riffed like that. It just worked. And so Rachel is not only incredibly creative and incredibly well prepared and knowledgeable, she does kind of let her departments do their work as best they can. She doesn't get into the nitty-gritty with us unless she feels she absolutely has to. But over several different feature films, I built up the kind of rapport with her where we could just roll. You know, she could tell me if she needed the feeling of the scene tweaked a little bit or something here and there. But really, when you get into a really smooth relationship with a cinematographer, you don't end up talking that much after a few years. You know, like you walk in, you might look at the blocking of a scene, you ask them where they're going to put their cameras, and then you go, okay, cool, you want a little bit of, like, you want some soft sunlight coming in through this window, how about a couple of hot hits on the floor over here for the characters to walk through, but nothing that hits their faces, maybe a little bit of fill over here. You know, you just like kind of give them your rough strokes, and they'll oftentimes nod and say, yeah, that sounds great, you know, or actually I was thinking, how about a little bit of this too? So that's the place that I feel that I reached with Rachel. I think we did 5 features together, mostly in the small indie range. I missed out on Fruitvale Station, which was Ryan Coogler's sort of breakout film. I was in Bolivia on another movie at the time, and I was really bummed because when I was asked to do it by Rachel, I was like, oh my God, it's right there. It's in Oakland. You know, it's in my neck of the woods. It's a meaningful story, and the film turned out incredible. So I mean, kudos to that crew. I wish I could have worked out. If there's ever a sort of like one that got away, man, I wish I could have worked with Rachel on Fruitvale Station.
In 2008, you pushed a dolly on the set of Randy Travis's Faith in You music video. What was that experience like? I personally would have died. I love Randy Travis.
Do you? Okay. See, I don't. I mean, yeah, I think Randy Travis got a great voice. He's got some great music. I prefer like that era of country when it comes to my country. So that was cool. And it's also cool, you know, because like my mom likes Randy Travis, that sort of thing. So, you know, with most of these things, your interaction with the big name talent is variable. Usually, you know, if you're doing your job right, it is going to be the star that sets the tone for how much interaction there is. So like I had a lot of great friendly conversations with Boyd Holbrook on Little Accidents, but I can't say that I don't remember having spoken directly to Randy Travis. But I was in very close proximity operating the dolly. And specifically, if you watch that music video, the camera is constantly circling around him. So we set up a 360-degree dolly track around him, and we ran circles around the guy for probably an hour. And the best part of the story actually has nothing to do with Randy Travis. So I was not an experienced dolly grip at the time. You see, 2008, like I'd only been doing stuff for like a year. And I don't know why I'm forgetting the last name of the gaffer who asked me to come out. His first name was Jeff Samuelson. He was a gaffer at the time. And shout out to Jeff, wherever you are in the world, because he gave me some of my first gigs coming out of school, some of my first, like what I consider to be my first real gigs. And I met some very good contacts through those jobs. I was not a dolly grip. I did not want to be a dolly grip. The first thing I showed up with, I'm rewinding a little bit, because the first job I did with Jeff Samuelson, and I have no idea how he got my number. I did not know Jeff previously, but I got a call to work on this other music video for a band called Armor for Sleep. And I showed up to light that day. I thought I was going to be, you know, basically a griptrician, they're sometimes called, you know, on non-union gigs. You're just running both grip and lighting stuff. And the DP walks up to us we're at the back of the truck, and Jeff says, well, Kyle doesn't know it, but he's your dolly grip today. I was like, okay. All right. I was secretly really glad, because somehow like it got considered, this was like, oh, this was like an important job, like a new gaffer, like I want to impress the guy. And I somehow had forgotten my gloves. I think I'd washed my work gloves the day before, and then forgot to put them back in my bag. So I didn't have my gloves. I was like, I'm screwed. Like I'm going to look like a chump in front of this gaffer that I want to work with more. So I was secretly relieved that I've been put in dolly grip duty, but I didn't know how to do it very well. I just kind of winged it that whole day and managed not to screw up. So then when Jeff got called, same director of photography for the Randy Travis gig, and I get called back in to do the dolly grip thing again. I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll do it, you know, for Jeff. And, but I would never call myself a dolly grip. That would be a disservice to all the amazing dolly grips out there. But a gig was a gig at the time. So I come out to do the Randy Travis thing. We're shooting at the $1 Million Theater in Los Angeles, which is right down, like I think it's on Broadway downtown. And this is all interiors for that. There was some exterior stuff that they shot later or before, I don't remember which. And I wasn't there for that. I was just the dolly grip for the one day. Had to bring the 400-pound dolly down this incredibly steep loading dock. It was really tough to get in there. Got it up on stage, and then built out this 360-degree track. And we start to do all the dolly work, and luckily I was somewhat prepared this time because we had done the Armor for Sleep video with this cinematographer, who's a pretty big, like pretty hefty Danish guy. I don't recall his name, but he's kind of a music video DP, which isn't the same as, there's just a kind of a different sensibility. Like music video, there's no, like you're not recording any sound. So, and especially because they're usually blasting playback the whole time, usually like verbal instructions during a shot are not that big of a deal. They're pretty common on those sets. So you hear there's a lot more talking while you're rolling, which is not normal. And so this guy, this huge Danish DP would talk to me the whole time about what he wanted. And his two instructions were faster and slower. That was all he would command me to do the entire time. So we would do continuous take after take after take. And he really liked the dolly work to get more intense as the music would swell. So as you'd hear, Randy Travis starts to sing louder and the music swells, and this Danish guy, faster, 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 and then the music would calm down. He'd go slower, slower, faster, slower, and he would sometimes reverse directions really quickly. So here I am. I mean, I sweated.
Did it make Randy Travis sick going fast and slow the way you were?
No, he's not. I mean, he's not on the dolly for one thing. We're just going around him, so he's just sitting on a stool. And he's a professional performer. This was later in his career. He'd been around the block by now. So he's used to, I'm sure, all kinds of different things. And so this Danish DP just yelling, faster, slower, faster, faster, slower, like the whole time.
Did you get a photo with Randy?
I did not.
Oh,
my whole career. So that's not the kind of guy I am. There are definitely those who have, they want to chat with as many of the famous folks who come onto set as possible. It's not my style. I always felt that they needed their space as much as I needed mine. Only one actor in my entire career did I ask for a photo, and that was with Sally Field on Hello, My Name is Doris.
To my next question. 2015 saw the release of Hello, My Name is Doris, starring Miss Sally Field, Tyne Daly, Wendy McClendon Covey, and Natasha Lyonne. You were the chief lighting technician. Did you feel that you made it working with those big name stars?
It's definitely, there was no way I was going to turn down a Sally Field movie. Absolutely no way. By the way, important, you missed Max Greenfield, who is like the romantic lead. So I would hate to. And Max,
those are my favorites.
Well, I hadn't, like New Girl was big at the time as a show, and Max was one of the leads. And I didn't watch the show. I knew people who did. So I didn't know what to expect. But Max was really nice and very professional, and so that's why I want to make sure he's not forgotten. But I mean, while it also was not a huge budget, and that one was tough. There are a handful of films that I can point to over the course of my career, and they're all difficult. Making movies is just hard. Standard day on set is 12 hours. And that's that's baseline. And by the time you finish your commute and all the other stuff, especially in LA, usually you haven't been on the clock the whole time, but you've been working for 14 most of the time. That runs over. So, it can be tough to have a life when you're in the film industry. And that movie was tough. We did not have a big crew, and we had some pretty ambitious locations. So, for example, there's some corporate offices where the main character's work. Kumail Nanjiani's in that as well. He hadn't like blown up quite as big yet. He was really nice too. So we shot for those corporate offices, we were in the former headquarters of Forever 21 in downtown LA. And that was a really rough building to shoot in. And on top of that, Sally Field's character has huge glasses that she wears in the film, and no anti-reflective coating in the world is going to save you from the reflections of your lights and equipment with, sort of these like really intentionally large, because her character is really dorky. And so the large glasses were part of that. She she had put effort. Wardrobe department had put effort into selecting those glasses. That was going to be a choice we stuck with. So that one, we got run pretty ragged on that. It's a good film. I'm proud of the film, but it was tough. But I did working with Sally Field, it's always going to be kind of one of my top moments of reflecting on that time in the industry. And just watching her on set is incredible. She's
down to earth.
Yeah, totally. And a consummate professional. So we were doing this scene in the character, Sally Field's character's, Doris, her house, which had a really difficult kitchen, low ceilings, no architecture to hide things. This was on location, not on a set. This was a kind of a thing that would have been a breeze on an actual studio set, but we did not have an easy kitchen to work in. And we had a scene with like 3 different characters in it, and pretty mobile, lots of shoe leather, as an old directing teacher of mine called it, characters moving around. And I recall, I have a memory of this being sort of a difficult scene to block. And we had already lit it. And there was a tendency on this film, unfortunately, for us to light and do multiple camera rehearsals, and then a particular person in charge would decide that they wouldn't pay any attention during the camera rehearsals, and then they would see we would get ready to do the first take, and they would decide they wanted to change something and they didn't like it. And so constantly on this film, we were having to stop, and it wasn't any of the actors' fault. Actors were all amazing, but the crew felt thrown under the bus, because we were just like, are you kidding me, man? We were ready. We did rehearsals. You should have seen this. You should have fixed it then. So it was at this point in the film, we were just like, oh my God, can we just do what we rehearsed, please? That's what we're lit for. That's what the camera people want to do. And this was another situation where we had rehearsed it. Everything was good, but there was something that wasn't working in the scene. And Sally Field called it out. She was like, hey, where do you want me for this line? And I will never forget this, because one of my favorite things an actor has ever said. You as technical crew who have set things up a particular way, and who really count on actors to hit their marks, be professionals in the same way that everybody else is. And so she turned to the director and said, where do you want me for this line? And he said, well, what feels natural to you? And Sally, without missing a beat, says, I don't care what feels natural. What looks good on camera? I was just like, oh my God. I wanted to hug her and twirl her in the air, because, there's an underlying layer to that message. Sally Field is one of the greatest living actresses of all time.
She's Norma Ray.
Yeah. Let me rephrase that. She's not just one of the greatest living actresses. She is one of the greatest actresses of all time. She can make anything work. She just needs to know what needs to be done. Just tell her where to be. She is so good that she will find a way to be on that mark. There's a lot of these conversations about what feels natural for the character? What should they do? What's my motive? The famous poking fun at actors is, what's my motivation? Well, that's not fair to actors. At the same time,
was she like Celeste on that movie Soap Dish?
I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that film.
You haven't seen that movie? She was in it. It was hilarious. It's a laugh out loud, campy comedy about a fake soap opera.
Well, now I'll have to see it at this point. But I can't say if she was like that. But I do know, the underlying message with something, when Sally Field says something like that, the simple part of it is that she's so good, she'll make whatever work. She just needs to know what works, what's actually going to, her work is wasted if it's out of focus, if it's in the dark, if whatever the case may be. If she as an actress is not working in synergy with the technical requirements of filmmaking, then all the effort she's putting in is wasted. And she didn't. To follow that up, sorry for another Sally Field story, but another thing that I will always remember from that is she did a scene. There's a really intense scene where she kind of has a panic attack and is crying and is moving around a lot, and she was kind of like internalizing, and she was sort of like before we were getting to roll, we had done our rehearsal, we'd done all this other stuff. Everybody was, in place and ready, and she was very, very focused at that moment. And the director was walking by, and she said, "Michael, are we going to film this next one?" And he said, "We were going to. Is something wrong? Do you need anything?" She said, No. I just need to know if we're doing it for real." He said, "Yeah." So we roll it. Now, again, this is a crying scene. She's not crying ahead of time. She's not like getting like, I saw her, she was focused, but she wasn't letting anything out yet. We rolled camera, slapped the slate, boom, waterworks. Like the tears just start, the performance is at full intensity from the snap of the slate. Incredible to watch. I've seen a lot of actors do amazing performances that they have to work themselves, but I've never seen anybody just like click it on like that. And that's to that point about not wasting anything. It's not that she didn't need anything. She was good to go. She just needed to know that this one was going to go on camera. Like, why cry? Why make the makeup artist reset stuff? Why, she just needed to know, am I actually turning it on? Is this a take? And boom, she can deliver every time.
Did she have a bottle of Tabasco sauce with her?
Oh, heck no.
You were a gaffer on season 3 of Dear White People.
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like? I mean, it was a popular movie, popular series.
Mm-hmm. What was the experience like? That's one of my favorite shows I've ever worked on. Not least because Topher Osborne, who is the director of photography, I worked with Topher longer than anybody else. More films than anybody else. Starting all the way back, we got to know each other at UCLA. I was an undergrad. He was in the graduate program. And so I started gaffing films for him while we were both still in school. And it just kept going. And so I got to be there as his career built and got more amazing, and then got to be part of that. And so he's just a wonderful cinematographer all around anyway. So working with Topher on a long form series was just a neat experience. And coming into season 3, so he hadn't shot, I may get this wrong, but I'm pretty sure there was a different cinematographer who shot season 1. So Topher shot the original feature film, and he asked me to come out and do it, but I couldn't do it. Because they shot like in Detroit or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but I wasn't able to make it out. And then a different cinematographer shot season 1 of the show, and then Topher was able to come in and do season 2. And one of the things that was neat is I know that there were things that Topher wanted to make better about like the look of the show from season 2. There were some things he had wanted to improve upon. So it was great to kind of come and be the person who got to deliver the wish list, if you will. And just working with Topher for so long, it was seamless. And an incredible crew. We had a huge part of it has to do with the amazing crew that we had. So I had rigging gaffer David Graves, best boy Mike Vieira, Walker Forshee is one of my electricians. These are guys who I've been working with for years. And that's one of the most special things about the industry. And I think anybody who works in, when you've got a good crew, this isn't exclusive to filmmaking, but I think the experience is intensified and compacted in the film industry because you do these long days, you go out on location or whatever, there's a shared uniqueness to the experience. And so we just had an amazing crew on Dear White People. And it was a show that while Justin, the writer director, is always kind of pushing the envelope. He always wants to do something new with it. Each season of the show has something of a unique identity. I haven't watched season 4, to tell you the truth, but I hear they kind of did more like a musical with it. So we get the opportunity he always wants to do something interesting. But he also, there are folks who want to do interesting things and they're a pain in the butt to work with. But Justin knows what he's doing. Justin knows what he wants. He knows when he gets it. So that's a rarer thing than you might think, to have both a writer and a director who knows what he wants, knows how to get it, but is also flexible when, say budgetary concerns or whatnot. He was just the right kind of person to work with. Cast was all really friendly. It's hard when you get, the bigger the show gets, the harder it is to get everybody on that show who knows what they're doing and works really well together. And that was just one of those great synergistic moments I can point to in my career of just saying, like, God, everybody on here was great. I loved working with everybody. And I'm proud of what we achieved. I thought that season looks fantastic. So I was proud of the work we got to do on it. So
was there as many minorities working behind the scenes as there were in front of the cameras?
Ooh, interesting. I don't know that I certainly couldn't give you an exact count. I mean, I would say reasonably diverse, whatever the heck you want that to mean. My lighting department was pretty white. I can tell you that. But that's just, again, sort of the accident of all of us who had worked together over time. This certainly wasn't a conscious choice.
In 2012, you were a lighting technician on the thriller movie The Mooring, starring Lizzie McGuire's mommy, Haley Todd, and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and Knots Landing alum, Thomas Wilson Brown. The movie was shot in Idaho and Washington. What do you recall about that shoot?
Oh, my Lord. I can't believe you brought up The Mooring. That was a trip. That movie has a very special place in my memory because it was a wild ride. There's mooring stories for hours because we were shooting up in the northern panhandle of Idaho, and we were based out of a small lumber town. Dang it, what was the name of that town? Saint something. Maybe it'll come to me. We're on a sort of a small lumber / lake town about an hour south of Coeur d'Alene, I think, and maybe an hour and a half. So we're out in the middle of nowhere in an age like this is before most people have smartphones. Wi-Fi is not as we didn't have like internet at the house that we stayed in. So a bunch of us because there was only like one small hotel, and I don't remember how this. I mean, this was wild. This is a lot of like weird explanations for everything. But essentially, most of the technical crew ended up staying in a house together, renting a house, and I slept up in the uppermost attic room with a friend and first assistant cameraman Isaiah Fortajada. Hey, out there, Isaiah. God, it's been a while. I'd known Isaiah for a while. I worked with Isaiah for a long time. He and I popped up on a lot of shoots together. And so he took the bed, I took the floor with a sleeping bag, and it was the middle of summer, and it's a horror movie. What do you do with horror movies? A lot of that stuff is shot at night, and a lot of this movie was outdoors, so we had to shoot at night. So we would sleep during the day. A lot of times we'd be up, we'd be getting up at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And by the time we would do that, the attic room that Isaiah and I were in would just be boiling hot. There's no relief from that. There was like one shower in the whole house, and I would try to get up early so I could run down and get a shower before a lot of other folks were awake. It was weird, man. And if you wanted to check your dang email, like you had to go to the one cafe downtown to try to get on their Wi-Fi. What can I tell you about The Mooring? I mean, something weird happened every day on that set, man. It was just like nothing was on schedule. Nothing was simple. We didn't have enough people to shoot a movie like that. We had this sort of like hodgepodge equipment package. We just kind of made it work every day. We ended up staying out there for like an extra week or 2 at the end of the shoot, like because we didn't have everything. Like we didn't have the movie in the can.
The ending?
I don't remember what. I mean, I know they went back and did some reshoots at some point. One of the things that was so weird, crazy about it is that the girls who are all the stars kind of the film. So the movie, for those who are not familiar, which nobody's seen it, so I don't imagine people are, it's about this like girls summer camp where all of them go to like disconnect from the world. Like their parents have all sent these girls there to like, they have to turn in their cell phones at the beginning of the camp, and they're supposed to reconnect with nature. And then a couple of like murderous, I don't know what else to call them, hillbillies, I guess is what the stereotypical term would be for them. But this guy and a girl who are intent on murdering them sort of show up. They just start offing girls. And it is sort of like a lone survivor situation at the end, but it starts out with like 12 or 15 girls. And all of these girls were part of the acting academy that the director and the, I think Hallie was her name, his wife, ran. So if you are like paying money to be part of an acting academy and then you're like going to be in this movie, you gotta be in the shots, right? You can't just be a throwaway character. Now they do like some die sooner than others, but that's but everybody needs your moment. So there's like 15 stars in the movie, which is one of the wildest things. Which is why one of many reasons why everything fell behind schedule was because it's like you do a scene, especially at the beginning of the movie before people start getting killed. You'd have all the girls, like they all needed close-ups. You had to cover the heck out of every scene. I mean, we did a campfire scene, which is kind of towards the beginning of the movie. We shot that campfire scene for like 2 or 3 days, and it's just like people talking around a campfire. But it was just because everybody needed their close-up because eventually they were going to die. So like these were the moments that we needed to capture with them, I guess. It was wild. There's plenty more stories, but like if I start rolling that stone downhill, we'll be here all night. We interacted with the girls who were being hunted more than anybody as far as the cast went, because they were just like always around, like because they're in every scene. So, and I think it was a difficult shoot, so the crew tried to keep an eye on their well-being. There's a scene where they have to like escape a boat on the lake because they're getting shot at, and they swim back in to shore. So these girls swam like 30 feet in this like cold lake water in the middle of the night, and they get up on shore, and a bunch of us look around, and there's like nobody standing by with towels. Like there's like nobody there to dry them, and we're like, these girls are gonna freeze, man. So like we all like ran, like a bunch of us ran to grab some stuff to like, dry them off or whatever. But that was the kind of preparation that was often going on behind the scenes. Is like, we're going to film this, and the people on the production side had not thought whatsoever about how they were going to film it. We just kind of show up.
A union movie?
Oh heck no, not even close. Nope.
Whoa. So, what did you think about the short-lived sci-fi anthology series Dimension 404?
That was an interesting experience, because it's 6 episodes, I think. It's by this guy's Rocket Jump. They got big doing a web series. Again, that sort of like experimental web series period that I talked about. They had called Video Game High School, I want to say, was the name of the thing. They're the same guys who do, this is going to sound weirder than it is, they have a really big Dungeons and Dragons podcast out called Dungeons and Daddies. And it's a narrative podcast. It's really funny and fun. They've got a great sense of humor. They're really cool, creative team, and just like boundless imaginations. This was their sort of like slightly lighter take on the Twilight Zone. And so each episode was a one-off. And, there's like a lot of different stuff. There's like a time travel episode. Is there a clone episode? I feel like there might be a cloning episode. There's a like big weird biological brain episode. And there were 3 cinematographers on the project, each one doing 2 episodes. So we'd be filming one and the other cinematographers would be prepping. And so we shot a lot of it in a warehouse in where out in Santa Clarita. It's sort of out in the Santa Clarita area, but I think even farther out, because we drive out past Magic Mountain every day to get out there. But it wasn't a film studio. It was like a converted warehouse kind of thing. Raging hot in the middle of the summer. We had I was my own lighting board operator on this show because we didn't have the budget for it. So we'd set everything up through control so I could control a lot of the lights, the studio stuff that we had rigged on iPads. But in order to do that, we had to have these Wi-Fi signal repeaters throughout these big warehouses, and I had to slap ice packs on these stupid things to keep them cool enough in order for them to function. It was really dusty. But we also did a couple episodes where we shot on the Universal backlot. Yeah, I mean, it was a fun, wacky show. We got to do a lot of like weird stuff, and
How do you think he'll be remembered amongst all the other sci-fi series that came before it?
Probably not much at all. I mean, it was put out on Hulu. It was for Hulu, and they came out with the 6 episodes, and that was that. So yeah, I mean, I doubt that it will go down in history as anything much more than a fun little Twilight Zone knockoff, but it's fun to work on.
2016 saw you being a gaffer and chief lighting technician on the comedy series Idiot Sitter, starring Jillian Bell and Charlotte Newhouse. Matthew Modine, Jennifer Elise Cox, and Drew Joji, some of my faves, were guest stars. What was that experience like?
I did 2 seasons of Idiot Sitter, seasons 2 and 3, and they were very different from each other. Jillian and Charlotte, the 2 leads, are both very nice, wonderful, funny, and had a great time with that part of the show. Kind of my favorite part was Stephen Root plays Jillian Bell's dad, and y'all may remember him as from Office Space, the Red Stapler, and he's also been in other amazing stuff. I mean, the guy's got an incredible both repertoire and resume.
You were in another movie with him, right?
I think he's in Hello, My Name is Doris. Yes, he plays the brother of Sally Field. So I got to see him do the more serious stuff in Hello, My Name is Doris, because he's kind of the movie doesn't really have a villain, but he's sort of like he's not very sympathetic to Doris's situation. So whereas he's pure comedy in Idiot Sitter, and I think he's one of the funniest parts of the show, because he's filthy rich and so random, and I think there's few people who can pull off the way that character is written without making it just seem like loony, and I think Stephen Root's one of the few people who can do that. But the first season I worked on, season 2, we shot almost entirely at a house out in Simi Valley, this weird like McMansion type thing on a hill outside Simi Valley. It's like an hour, 40 minutes to an hour, depending on different factors. But it's at the top of a hill we had to shuttle up to every day. That was kind of obnoxious to have to like park at the bottom of the hill and take a 15-minute shuttle every day. But it was tough to work up there because the house was huge, and it's on the top of a hill, so it's windy a lot of the time. So the poor grips had a rough time. We worked our butts off to rig that location. We planted a big generator on the kind of the back side of the hill, if you will, and then ran all of our cable up and over. And we had to do what's called a ring of fire, which is a particular, like a circular cable run around the entire property, essentially. And what's nice about that is when you bake into a location for that long, then you get to kind of just take over the joint. But that house was tough to work in because the owners were very restrictive about certain things. We're just like, did anybody talk to these people about how we shoot movies? Because like I need to put that kind of equipment there, and they can't tell me not to. Location department need to get involved and tell them what we need here. So And it was challenging with a smaller crew to try to tackle a house that big and just constantly hopping all over the property. But it's fun. Chris Darnell, who is the cinematographer on that, I worked with Chris on a lot of projects, and we had a lot of fun. And my friend Matt Verschelde, who is a key grip, also a blast to work on. He worked on both of the West Virginia movies with Rachel Morrison as well. So Matt Verschelde and I go a long way back, and we always have fun together. But what can I say about the show? So the season 3 was totally different because we shot that on the Paramount lot, like basically the whole thing. We went off on location a couple of times for specific things, but one of the things had been like, they knew we had some, the showrunners, maybe not the showrunners, but the like production team on season 2 had not been super on top of it. There were a lot of challenges to overcome. Luckily, the showrunners at the top level recognized where the problems were. They brought all the technical crew back for season 3, but they had a different set of production guys. And so things went a lot more smoothly in that regard, though we got penny pinched pretty hard on season 3 because they were so determined to save money. It was just like, please, at some point you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like, you got to give me the tools to work here, or your stuff's not going to get done on time. What you don't pay in equipment up front, you're going to pay in overtime later. So that was a little rough.
You're the chief lighting technician on the dark comedy Other People.
Wait, do we describe it as a dark comedy?
That's what I saw on IMDb and on.
I think of it as a drama. Like, there's funny moments in there. Molly Shannon plays the mom. It's, to me, the emotion is sort of the focal point of the film as opposed to the jokes. But yeah, it's a good little movie. I like it.
So was Molly Shannon as cheerful and goofy offset as she usually is when she's in front of the camera?
I don't have a lot of specific memories. I mean, certainly, like, it was straightforward and professional working with her, and the cast was great on it. What I remember that movie having just a really strong cast, and Bradley Whitford
has a West Virginia connection.
A West Virginia connection.
Paul Dooley is from Parkersburg.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Jesse Plemons, that's the male lead who plays Molly Shannon's son. Bradley Whitford from The West Wing plays Molly Shannon's husband, the dad. I remember the cast just being really solid and easy to work with, talented. Yeah, it's that one. When I say most movies are tough to make, that one I feel like we got to sort of stretch our wings a little bit. I remember the creativity on that film for some reason, and I'm trying to place why. Brian Burgoyne is the cinematographer, and I worked with Brian on a bunch of stuff. I think he was an AFI classmate of Rachel Morrison's, and I think Rachel introduced me to Brian. And Brian's great to work with. And I think I remember being able to do really satisfying work on other people. There's a sense of people, I think, don't realize how much movie logistics are beholden to just kind of the real world that's behind them. You're constantly dealing with the logistical factors. And sometimes those logistical factors outweigh your ability to do your best work. That's what you're really up against most of the time, is like, between the money, the time, the manpower, do I have what I need to make this the way it's supposed to look? And I remember Other People as being something where I felt like we just really made that movie look the way it was supposed to. I'm proud of that.
2013, you were a gaffer on the Zachary Levi comedy series Tiny Commando.
Tiny Commando. That was fun.
How complicated is it loading someone who's supposed to be 4 inches tall?
Yeah, that was fun. I have a lot of memories of Tiny Commando. I'm sure in part because it was we always had to factor in like the tiny guy. And Ed Helms plays the bad guy who is also tiny. And so there's a lot of, I mean, it's just a lot of, we shot all the real world stuff first. So like we would shoot the scenes out there that Zach Levi was eventually going to be comped into. Because without it, it's a lot tougher unless you're doing the whole movie on green screen or whatever. Then you got to know what your scene looks like before you can then light them to fit into that scene. So yeah, it's a lot of reference. When you finally, I think we did like 2 or 3 weeks solid of green screen work towards the end, just almost all with Zach Levi and Ed Helms to do their, you know, their bits where they get thrown in things. And so it's just a whole lot of referencing back to the original footage from the scene that they're being put into. And you his character, the tiny commando. It's one of the sillier projects I think I worked on. But he's, you know, I mean, he's a commando, so it's very action oriented. There's explosions, there's jumping and whatnot. So Zach Levi had to do a lot of stunts in there, lots of mats on the ground. And we shot for those 2 to 3 weeks in a studio way up in Sun Valley. I'm trying to remember the name of the place, but I'd worked there on one of the Resident Evil games as well. And so yeah, I don't know that I have a whole ton to add about that process, except that it's, you know, it's very technical and you're just doing a lot of matching, both in the quality of light and the intensity of light. And, you know, if let's like driving, for example, and you're wanting to do lighting gags to simulate, you know, maybe that tree limbs are providing dappled shade or whatnot. So you do a lot of gags in order to sell this being comped into the footage. But
Was that an expensive show to shoot?
I don't think anything I did with Kids at Play was all that expensive. It was, it had a budget. I think it was one of the bigger budget things that I worked on with Kids at Play, but it was not huge. Again, always, I do remember he has a tiny house. Inside there's a van. They bought an old like utility van, like a handyman's truck kind of thing, in order to kit it out, because the sort of like His Girl Friday character drives this around, and Tiny Commando has all of his equipment in the back and whatnot. He has a little house set up on a workbench in the back. And so they built this tiny house with a tiny little backdrop. And so I had to kit that whole thing out with miniature lights. And at the time, LED stuff wasn't that good. So it was like the last thing I did where I had to do this like kind of crazy, like it would have been super easy now with LEDs. I would have been done in a day and would have looked really nice and wouldn't have had that much water, but we had to do it all with incandescent bulbs. I had to buy all these really special small incandescent bulbs to sort of fit them around, not melt the tiny backdrop, but also light it up properly. So yeah, Tiny Commando was interesting.
So, what was Zachary Levi really like? I mean, he gets painted out as this clean-cut actor with a golden halo around him. Does his image fit?
Yeah, I hate
professional?
I hate to be that guest who's like, I don't know, man. Like, but you know, I mean, like I said, I always felt it was part of my job as a professional to, you know, not get in the actor's space too much. In part because when actors would get in our way, when we were trying to do stuff, it was a pain. So
did he throw a chair at anyone?
No. No, I didn't. I don't recall any negative experiences with Zach Levi. It was, and you know, I mean, that's a shoot where you gotta kind of be a little bit of a trooper. He's playing kind of a, I mean, I guess it's sort of like a kid show role, if you will. You know, and he's got to do a bunch of sort of stunt work, and he's got to do lots of acting to not real people, because he's acting on a green screen, and that actor that he's talking to in the scene isn't there in the room at all. So it was a challenge show, and I don't recall him tackling it with anything but professionalism.
Oh, has there been any major diva moments on the sets of any of the movies or TV shows you've worked on of Faye Dunaway proportions?
I thank my lucky stars that most of the time I avoided any major incidents or people throwing fits. Honestly, if I had a problem, it was usually with somebody on production who was a problem, who wasn't doing their job well. And the only, I mean, I have a movie that I worked on. I won't name any names, but there was a lead actress on this on this movie where, you know, every day was like something else, and it was never like, there was never super diva level of like, I'm going to bring everything to a halt. There's lots of small delays, lots of, I'm not leaving my trailer until such and such. And in particular, in this one scene, we had a difficult camera move, and it's kind of it was an old house, like old Pasadena style, like craftsman home. So lots of dark wood, challenge to light. We were doing a day scene and we're shooting it at night. So I got to have lights outside every window. And on top of that, the cinematographer had kind of chosen this like fairly complex dolly move that doesn't give me a lot of space to work inside the room. So it's pretty much all got to come through the windows. And we were fighting to get the exposure that we needed in there. So we had a pretty, you know, we had a not a huge or bright light by film standards, but we had something, you know, we had a bright sunlight motivated fixture coming in through one window. And it was trained on one of her marks so that when she hit that spot and delivered the majority of her performance, we would get her up to exposure. And when she got on set that day, I mean, she threw a fit about the brightness of the light. And somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true, I don't know if this is what she told them, that she'd had some kind of eye surgery recently, so her eyes were extra sensitive. I have no idea if that's true. I do know that at this point, we'd already experienced plenty of trouble with her, so it was like, I don't know that I want to believe you or if I care. But also, you know, in that sense of like, we're all professionals here. You're going to do an eye surgery just before you shoot a movie? Like, you know, we use bright lights all the time on movies, right? Like that's like, it's like, you know, it's not as bad as working on stage, but it's like a stage actor complaining about how bright the lights are. That's just a piece of the hardware. It's part of the scenery, man. You got to work with it. And in that Sally Field sense of like, just tell me where I need to be and I will deliver my end of the bargain. That wasn't happening here. It was just always some reason why she couldn't do it. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the cinematographer made the executive. I was like, it's your call. Like, you know, the shot, you know why we need that light there. You know why it needs to be as bright as it is because you designed the shot. So like, if you want me to slow it down, as we would say, like make it less bright, then I can do that. But you're going to have to compensate on the camera for that. That's, you know, that's your executive decision to make. I can't tell you, me as the gaffer can't tell you as the cinematographer what stop to shoot at. That's part of your creative decision making. So if you want to compromise that for what this actress wants, then we can do that, whatever. And we did. There's just one of many situations on that film that we just kind of, lots of little things like that. And that was what I ran into more often than like any kind of massive showdown. I certainly ran into things where the, you know, maybe the actor and the director weren't getting along. But nothing that ever rose to the level of like destructive or super toxic. I think I got lucky in that regard because I don't think that's, you know, I don't think it's common necessarily to work as long as I did without while seeing that so little of that.
Was that actor bipolar or just on the nose candy?
No idea. I don't at the time, like I think she's gotten some bigger, she's big back in the day and then I think has gotten big again ish since then. I don't know.
She's gotten fugly. I saw the actor on a certain Stars show and I'm like, damn, they're bringing out the ugliness inside. But I'm not judging.
Sure, right. Well, the main thing was I was just like, you know, the one thing I saw was that typically I never saw like the big stars, the people who know they've made it, the people who know what they're doing. A lot of times they're not the problem. Never saw a huge diva moment out of them. I never saw a huge diva moment out of up and coming actors who were just, like happy to be there, happy to be working. It was always the like mid-level stuff where like they'd done some big things, but they never got the stuff they really thought they were due. And they just like take it out on other people. So it was always that mid-level star where you're like the who? Oh, yeah, that's right. That person. Like, those were the biggest problems. They were the ones I would worry about when they showed up on set.
In 2014, you were a gaffer on the gay horror movie The Dark Place. One of the stars, Sean Paul Lockhart, aka Brent Corrigan, kind of famous. Do you remember that movie?
Yes, I worked on a couple of films with that production company. My friend Dave Barry was the cinematographer, and he'd worked with them for a long time. And so we did a movie in Seattle, and then The Dark Place was this second movie we did, and that one was in Portland. Maybe I'm getting it reversed. I think it was Seattle, then Portland a few years later for Dark Place. It's a weird plot. Everybody on it was really nice. And the two, I think it's JT and Carlos are the name of the guys who run the production company, and JT is the director. But just wonderful guys, super nice, and the cast was nice. They were fun movies to work on. I always felt like the plot for Dark Place was a little strange, but
Sean Paul Lockhart used to be a porn star. Do you think it's time for Hollywood to let more former porn stars who are wanting to pursue legit acting careers get mainstream roles?
I can't speak to those particular prejudices from the actor's perspective. I don't know what they're up against, like what that looks like. They just like don't get the roles as far as I've seen. Like when you're on the outside of it, you don't know what anybody has said to them or whether it simply is sort of a passive resistance. I mean, personally, I think that work should be granted. Work should be given on merit. Do you have the talent? Then you should be able to do the thing. You could, I'm sure there might be some Oscar-worthy talent hidden in there. I don't know. I think that anybody who can do the work and do it well, anybody who's right for the role should get the role, pure and simple. And whatever it is the problem is that actors too, a part of the appeal of something like Hollywood, we all know people who track the sort of like backstories and careers of the stars, right? So people are interested in the personalities behind the characters. You're not always, Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise, right? Like you go and see Top Gun because it's Tom Cruise, not necessarily because of the character he plays even, but because it is Tom Cruise. So we can't ignore the fact that there's a personality behind that there's a person, an actor with a career behind the role.
Nina Hartley was funny as hell in Boogie Nights. That was William H. Macy's wife, the porn actress in that.
Okay. Well, I mean,
her one-liners were to die for.
I mean, that's what I mean.
I'm not sure why she didn't continue on a mainstream acting path, because she's a damn good actress.
I don't know who can say. We all have our choices to make, and maybe it is because of other stigma that she didn't. I don't know. I'm sure some of it is just plain old-fashioned snobbery. Like, well, we consider ourselves something above that. I don't know. I think on an individual basis, anybody who qualifies should have an honest shot at the work.
You tried your hand at acting in 2009. You played a cop.
Oh, Lord.
In Bobby Fischer Live.
No, it's not what it sounds like.
How did you wind up in that role?
I can't believe that's on IMDb. Oh Lord, I don't know what that actor's name is. He was like Ken in the original Street Fighter movie. He's had an interesting life since then. I think for a number of reasons. Probably maybe that diva complex we were talking about. Damian Chapa, that's his name. Boy, can't believe I remember that. As I understand it, Damian Chapa made, after his star did not continue to rise after the original Street Fighter movie, eventually ended up just he made a crap ton of low budget movies, and I mean low budget movies, in the like 2010s, right after it became feasible to get like a digital camera and shoot this kind of stuff, because Lord knows he didn't have the money for film. And so he's shooting on crappy digital cameras, and he had enough industry contacts to pull people in. But there was, speaking of like writer's strike in those couple of tough years, this is a story I don't mind telling. It's not like I'd ever, Damian Chapa and that circle was real weird, man. And it was not a healthy place. I knew somebody who worked on a couple of those films, and there was not a lot of work at the time. We were still kind of in that fallout zone from the writer's strike. And the buddy of mine who had been working on this film, so Damian Chapa would churn out these movies in like 2 weeks. He would write, direct, and star in them. I mean, we're not even talking like Roger Corman level stuff here. We're talking real bad, real cheap, real dumb. No, absolutely no like real research into them. He would just do like biopics of famous people, and he would always write and then star himself, and they just like made it up as they went along. And so a buddy of mine I knew worked on these things, and he had told me about them. He told me the horror stories of working on these Damian Chapa movies, but he was still taking them from time to time just as filler work. And he was the gaffer on some of this stuff. And one day, for a while there, when he and I were working closely together, I might call him to fill in for me if there was a gig I couldn't take, or he would do the same. So he called me one day. He was like, "Hey, I got this thing." I was like $250 for the day or whatever. I don't even think it was that much. I wanted to say it was like $100, maybe $150. So can you go and you do it? And I was like, "Sure, man. Like, I'll take the work, definitely." So I get the call sheet, and I see at least like the location was super close to my apartment at the time, but I see the call sheet and my heart sinks, because I have said yes. He didn't tell me that it was a Damian Chapa movie, and I was like, "Oh no, this is gonna suck." I show up. I show up because I said I would. Like, I'm not one of those guys who just like wants to jump ship. And I get there, and it's like every bit as bad as what he's described. Just like barely controlled chaos. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows where the equipment is. There's like no crew. There's like, probably like 8 or 9 people there shooting this dumb thing. Damian Chapa looks like he's like half out of his mind most of the time. There's like no effort put into like actually making him like Bobby Fischer. Now, Bobby Fischer did have a period in life where he was a little off. Was going through some
chess player Bobby Fischer.
Yes. Yeah. So imagine the original Ken from Street Fighter playing that, but not trying very hard to do
That's tragic.
Any real acting. Oh, no. I mean, there's no reason to go watch this movie, and you probably can't. I don't know where on earth you could find it.
Do you get any royalties?
No, absolutely not. So here's the reason why I'm a cop in that movie. It is because by halfway through the day, I was like, because my buddy had called me. He was like, "Can you fill in for me for 3 days while I go and do this other commercial?" I was like, "Sure." By halfway through the day, I was like, I cannot do this for 2 more days. Like, this is like depressing to watch this unfold. So I'd already kind of made the decision to like find somebody else, and I was like already texting other guys I knew, like see if they could come in and do the rest of the days. And I did find somebody. So I knew I wasn't going to stick through it. And then there comes a scene, because Damian would just like make up whatever he was going to shoot next. Like, they would just decide, like, and when you're not like really,
so it wasn't historically accurate.
Oh, not even close, man. Not even close. No, don't watch this to learn anything about Bobby Fischer. Watch it to learn a lot about Damian Chapa. And so there's a scene where Bobby Fischer, who is kind of like lost his mind at this point, he's like wandering the streets. I don't know. The movie doesn't make any sense, and I was only there for a day. So there's a scene where the cops come and accost him. And I think they think he's a vagrant in the scene. Again, none of it had to make any sense. So there was a cop, but that they brought in. There was an actor there to play the cop. But Damian wasn't happy that there was only one cop. He was like, we need another cop. Like, he's like, this is ridiculous. Like, they were trying to do the scene. He was like, I need like 2 cops to come after me. And he looks around, and I'm there. I've got like basically like the kind of hair I've got right now, like fairly short, buzzed hair. I swear to God, this is how it happens. He looks around the set. He's like in costume. We've already shot several takes of him, of the cop accosting him. He looks around. He's like, we need another cop. He was like, you. He points to me. He's like, you look like a cop. Do you want to be in the movie? I said, nah. He's like, come on. Be in the movie. Be the cop. I was like, nah, dude, I'm good. I'm good behind the camera. And he's like, what do you want? Do you want some? I was, he was basically started offering me money to be the cop. And I was like, okay, well, I've already decided I'm not going to work the other 2 days on this. And so I'm not going to make as much money as I thought I was going to this week. So maybe some extra cash would be good. So we end up negotiating an extra like $100 because he wants another cop in the scene. And here's my other rationale was I was like, well, what do the cops get to do in this scene? They get to beat him up. And Damian was a little crazy, so he was okay with us actually punching him. So I got to punch him in the stomach in the scene because he wanted to be punched in the stomach. And I was like, okay, so
Did you enjoy it?
I mean, a little bit, yeah. Because I was like, this like absolute crap show of a movie I was like, I need to get off of this thing as quickly as possible. And I'm about to walk out with some extra cash and I get to punch him before I leave. So that's why I'm a cop in the movie, was so that I could get a free punch and get a little extra cash. But that's not, that's not me attempting to break into acting.
Are you concerned about AI being used to alter movies, music, and art?
Absolutely.
Are you concerned about old footage of you and Bobby Fischer live?
Okay, if there's one,
reused.
No, if you can use AI to do anything, please just use it to take me out of that movie. I'm concerned, one, about the devaluation of artists and their expertise. I'm not, like, there's the jobs thing, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are like, oh, well, I mean, you just need a different job, right? Like, that's how technology works. Like, now you're not going to do that thing. Instead, you'll learn how to like prompt AI. I'm like, that's not the same, though. Like, creating AI prompts might be a certain kind of skill, but it's not the same as an artisan's craft and all the various ways in which skilled technicians and artists contribute to the production of a film. So there's that, for one thing. The other thing is that here's what's every technology, of course, can unlock new creative possibilities. I don't dispute that. But we've been making movies for over 100 years. We know how to make movies. Like, as a species, we're pretty good at it. We've made a lot of great films over time. There's always room for new technology and new techniques. Yes. But this is something that doesn't actually make the movie. Like, it just creates something whole cloth out of other movies. You know what I mean? Like, because of what AI does, because generative AI uses this big training pool, it only knows how to hoover up all these, its training pool, and then spit out something that reflects a series of mathematical probabilities based on that training pool. It doesn't know how to create anything. It is simply an algorithm. That's what people don't realize about a lot of this AI stuff. Is all of it. It's not smart at all. It's just simply a numbers game. No matter what kinds of images it can create, a lot of the new AI video generation is just going to be used to make up crap as we go along. And you don't have that. Part of what is incredible about filmmaking is the fact that you get dozens, sometimes hundreds of people involved. You know how hard it is to make anything good when you have that many people, that many cooks in the kitchen, if you will, and they're all involved at different degrees. I've watched enormous creative potential and incredible skill go into the making of a bad movie or a bad commercial or a bad TV show. It takes incredible talent even to pull that off. And so the talent and luck and creativity that is required to make something amazing, something beautiful, something that sticks with you through the generations is an incredible human endeavor that does not happen alone in a room. There's so many people that are involved in that. Whereas video generation by AI is a person at a keyboard who is crutching off of 100+ years of filmmaking and photography and other people's work. And you might say, well, all right, well, but like, aren't we all
It's
like
tacky as sampling.
Yeah, and I know that I don't mean to insult any DJs out there or anything like that. I don't know enough about that world, but there is a difference between when somebody says, well, but like, if, for example, if somebody says, well, I want this scene to look like a Godfather, and I, as the gaffer, go, okay, cool, all right, let me figure out how to light this like the Godfather. You might say, well, aren't you just borrowing somebody else's idea? Yes, but I didn't just actually rip off the Godfather to do it. And I had to have the creative skill to know how to replicate the look of the Godfather. I didn't just type a couple words into the keyboard and say, all right, here's the Godfather look now. And I think we have to ask ourselves the question when it comes to AI, because everybody's going to say, well, but it's faster and it's cheaper and it's da-da-da-da. Like, you cut out all of these costs and cheaper almost always wins. But I think we have to question for ourselves, and this is why I left the film industry, because a huge part of it was simply the production of content. I've come to despise that word, the word content, because a lot of it, to me, it stopped feeling like we were making films. And I say there's lots of stuff out there that's great. Like I said, I really enjoyed working on Dear White People and stuff like that. So obviously I'm not including a lot of examples in here, but to me, it felt like so much of what was coming out was content and not films. I don't want more content in my life. That's just stuff. It's just like things to stuff into your life for the sake of putting it there, or for avoiding something or what have you. And the reason why we embarked on why we write a novel, why we paint a painting, why we make a film, is about the fundamentals of human communication and expression. These are ways of conveying ideas that our everyday language cannot. That if just you and me talking, I might not be able to put these things into words. And if that's the point of the thing, then AI should have no say in that, because AI is just a thing to sort of plug the gaps, to stuff into the cracks, and to facilitate this sort of like mucus-like constant flow of content into our lives. We don't need more of it. There's already more streaming crap than anybody can watch. Who needs more of it? So let's not race to the bottom with this kind of, the things, the genie's out of the bottle, and tech uses that kind of excuse all the time. Well, we can't put it back now, right? Like, the thing exists, people are going to use it. And if people are using it, then there's demand. But I think there's something of a circular argument there that is very self-serving. And as we've learned with things like social media, just because, it's like drugs, just because it exists and you can use it and it makes you feel a certain way when you use it, does not mean you should use it.
Now it's time for 5 questions. Best San Francisco band, Third Eye Blind or Jefferson Airplane?
Honestly, I don't know that much Jefferson Airplane. I think I got to go with Third Eye Blind just because I'm slightly more familiar with the music. Neither one is really my thing. Sorry.
Matewan or Wrong Turn?
Oh, Matewan, of course. Come on.
E.T. or Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
E.T. There's too much heart.
Plastic surgery or natural aging?
Natural aging, of course.
If West Virginia got a grip on its obesity epidemic, would the porn industry choose to relocate from California to the Mountain State?
I think you got a population density problem for that, man. You need a big pool of people to draw from, and West Virginia doesn't have it right now. So, yeah, and to be perfectly honest, I think West Virginia would need a bigger airport to make that kind of thing.
I want to thank my special guest, Kyle Warmack, for sharing his lighting career with Mothman and the Bible Belt listeners. Check him out on the Internet Movie Database. Seriously, he's got a long list of credits to his name. For Mothman and the Bible Belt podcast outlet updates, guest bios, episode breakdowns, and links to social media, please check us out on the web at www.mothmanandthebiblebelt.com. Thanks for listening.